Okay, some people tweeting me about who they think are the champions in their community. Just continue doing that. You can tweet, but you can also WhatsApp, right? And that's voice notes. I'll get Rahima to read it out just now. WhatsApp voice notes or text 061 766 0355. Penny Appeal, we'll talk about them coming up shortly in our Ramadan in Society feature that I'm looking forward to. But pay the grants is something, goodness, people should be looking forward to, but it's not quite happening, isn't it? In fact, it's very much the opposite. So let's try and make sense of what's happened. We had a discussion about it last week, remember, but that story has moved, or has it not moved? Shaeera Kalla is with me. She's got many titles, part of the C19 People's Coalition, member of, researcher at the UJ Center for Social Change, and in the context of today, member of hashtag Pay the Grant. Shaeera, assalamu alaikum. Good chatting to you once again.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, so give us some understanding. I mean, last week we didn't chat with you, but one of your colleagues about a specific deadline around grants. So what was the deadline and why the big concern?
Sure. So last week we had a week of action towards the 30th April deadline, which was the day that government had said they were going to be terminating the COVID 350 social relief of distress grant. And we were mobilizing for a long time for that grant to be extended, for it to be expanded to include caregivers who were excluded from receiving the grant, and to also have it increased, because 350 Rand is a paltry amount. It's below the food poverty line of 585 Rand. So we were mobilizing and organizing in communities to, against the termination. And unfortunately, what happened last week is we saw that the government didn't respond to the calls from civil society. And I mean, these calls have reverberated strongly throughout. It's not rocket science. People are hungry. People are landless. People do not have the resources they need to cope in this pandemic, but even pre-pandemic. So we're sort of facing a crisis upon a crisis. And our call was simple, that the government cannot abandon the most marginalized in our society, which, if we think about it in numbers, would account for about 2/3 of the population, actually.
Well, give me the implications of these grants being stopped last week. How does that play out in terms of how does it affect, an individual family multiplied across the length and breadth of the country?
Yeah, sure. So if we look at the COVID grant, it was going to about 6.9 million people. 9 million people had applied for it, but only 6.9 million people actually received it. And they were people who had zero income. So they have now been left completely destitute. And if we assume that each of them has about 2 dependents, this means that 1/3 of our country would be affected by this and would face increased hunger and hardship due to the termination. And then if we add the 7 million caregivers whose grants were terminated last year, November, we're facing 2/3 of our population affected by this. And these are conservative estimates, of course.
Do you get a sense, therefore, and I've been following your tweets as well, you get a sense that the people in power, which is obviously the government, that they're rather heartless when it comes to dealing with this?
Yes, heartless, but also really unreasonable, because this is not sustainable. This is a humanitarian crisis in the making.
The flip side is government may, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, but they may say also paying out a grant is also unsustainable if it's a COVID-linked one. It's over and above the normal grants given, and we actually just don't have the money.
Actually, we've done a lot of cost studies, and it seems completely affordable, especially when you consider the long-term impact of not doing it. So if you extend the grant at the current levels, we're looking at about 23 billion for a year. Since COVID is going to be with us for some time, we don't have a mass vaccination rollout. We also have a 3rd wave looming, and we have one of the worst unemployment rates in the world. So it seems rather reasonable to spend the resources on these grants. But what we see as well is that there needs to be a more permanent situation or solution when it comes to social protection. So what we see this grant as is really as a bridge to a universal basic income guarantee, which the calls for globally are growing, and which I think is a very important intervention that is not new in South Africa. For 20 years now, we've had commissions and recommendation that this is an important thing to do, to redistribute wealth from the richest to the poorest, especially given the fact that we have the highest concentration of wealth in the world in South Africa.
And disproportionate in terms of wealth.
Exactly,
inequality.
inequality.
Right, yeah. So
Yes.
quickly, because I think it's an ongoing conversation I think Salam Media needs to be having with people like yourself, not just today, but I think all throughout the year, right? But, and hopefully it stops because the issues will be sorted out, but it's not the case. So quickly, in terms of what for you, in terms of pay the grants, is your immediate call, and what's your long-term goal?
So the immediate call is for government to extend and to expand and increase these grants and to improve the administration of these grants, because it's been very piecemeal, and people have been waiting in lines. You've seen the pictures, I'm sure, and that is just indignified, and government needs to account for the bad rollout of these grants and now the termination of them when in fact support should be expanded. So we want society to get behind this call. And if you'd like to get involved, you can email us at paythegrants@gmail.com, and we can add you to the various provincial organizing groups that have formed around this issue. And we really need to act together and to rally behind.
And do you get a sense? I mean, Prof. Shaeera Kalla made the point around COVID to say government responds when people mobilize. He was talking about COVID issues, of course, right? Do you get the same sense that the greater the level of mobilization around pay the grants from not just even the poverty-stricken, but certainly even from middle-class South Africans, the better the chance that government will actually respond?
Yeah, I mean, in the short amount of time I've been here, that has been my lived experience, that unless there is noise and unless there is some kind of mobilization at a very broad level, government does not seem to take seriously the responsibility of leading and caring for its people.
Okay, Shaeera Kalla, thanks for planting that seed in my mind and certainly the mind of listeners and watchers all throughout the length and breadth of Salam Media. Thank you for your time, most appreciated. It's a big issue, it's an important issue. It's in fact it's Ramadan, so just think about it and our understanding of what zakat does besides lillah in terms of equalizing society. And here's the government of the country, and they remove a grant from people who are absolutely poverty-stricken, more so now than ever before. And you get this thing taken away. And 350 rands is nothing already. And even that gets taken away. What happens next? Okay, so hashtag pay the grants. Check it out. We'll talk to the team from Penny Appeal and what they do in our Ramadan in Society feature next.
Our efforts continue all through the blessed month of Ramadan.
So our aim is to, inshallah, literally save a few lives